I think I didn't do anything wrong, just made a joke to get a laugh. But the next morning, I found legal documents on the kitchen table, and my husband wouldn't even look at me. All because of one little joke, and now everyone's treating me like I'm the villain. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The kitchen smelled of roast lamb and rosemary, and for once, our suburban, semi-detached house felt warm and alive. Ruth had brought her famous Yorkshire puddings, Martin was actually smiling, and even 8-year-old Isla was chattering away about her school play. It should have been perfect, one of those family dinners that reminds you why you married into the Blythe clan in the first place. But Darren was being his usual distant self, barely contributing to the conversation, just pushing food around his plate like he had somewhere better to be. After 5 years of marriage, I'd grown tired of his moods, his silences, the way he made me feel like I was performing alone while he sat in judgment. "Morven, you look lovely tonight," Ruth said, though her eyes seemed to be studying me more than complimenting. "That dress is very bold." "Thank you," I replied, smoothing down the red fabric. I thought it was time to make an effort. Sometimes I feel like I'm invisible in this family. Darren's fork paused halfway to his mouth, but he said nothing. Typical. Ewan, at least, was being his usual charming self, keeping the conversation flowing, making Isla laugh with his silly voices. He'd always been the fun brother, the one who knew how to live a little. Where Darren was methodical and serious, Ewan was spontaneous and warm. "Uncle Ewan, tell the story about the ghost in your flat," Isla squealed. "Oh, not that one again," Ruth laughed, but she was smiling. "You'll give her nightmares." As Ewan launched into his theatrical ghost story, I caught him glancing at me, and I felt that familiar flutter. We'd grown close over the past few months, too close perhaps, but it wasn't like Darren was paying attention. A woman has needs, and when her husband treats her like a piece of furniture, well, sometimes she finds warmth elsewhere. The wine was making me bold, and I was tired of tiptoeing around Darren's moods. When there was a lull in the conversation, I raised my glass with a laugh. "You know, I feel so lucky to be part of this family," I said, looking around the table. "I mean, I'm so close to all of you now. Sometimes I think even Ewan knows me better than Darren does." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ruth's face went rigid, her fork clattering against her plate. Martin suddenly found his wine glass fascinating. Ewan's cheeks flushed red, and he wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. But it was Darren's reaction that surprised me most. Instead of his usual passive silence, he slowly placed his napkin on the table and stood up. "Excuse me," he said quietly, and walked out of the room. "Oh, honestly," I said with a forced laugh, trying to salvage the moment. "He's so sensitive. Can't anyone make a joke in this house?" My mother Adele, who'd been unusually quiet all evening, finally spoke up. "That's just Morven's sense of humor," she said to the table. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But Ruth was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not disapproval exactly, but something colder. Something like recognition. "Isla, sweetheart, why don't you help Grandpa with the dishes?" she said, her voice carefully controlled. After Isla skipped off to the kitchen with Martin, Ruth leaned forward slightly. "Morven, dear, perhaps we should be more careful about the jokes we make in front of the child." "It was harmless," I protested. "Everyone's being so dramatic." But even as I said it, I could hear Darren's voice in the hallway, low and urgent, and Ruth's whispered responses. They were talking about me, I was sure of it, planning something. The rest of the evening limped along awkwardly. Darren returned, but barely spoke, and when it came time for everyone to leave, the usual warm hugs felt perfunctory. Even Ewan seemed eager to get away, avoiding my eyes as he kissed my cheek goodbye. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Darren's carefully controlled breathing, I told myself I'd done nothing wrong. So what if I'd had a little fun with Ewan? So what if I'd made a harmless joke? If Darren had been a better husband, more attentive, more present, none of this would have happened. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to examine too closely, I knew something had shifted. The way Ruth had looked at me, the way Ewan had fled, the way Darren had simply shut down. I'd crossed a line and everyone knew it. The next morning at work, I needed to talk to someone who would understand. Gemma and Xian were my closest friends at the marketing firm, and they'd always been good for a laugh and some perspective when family drama got too intense. You should have seen their faces, I told them over coffee in the break room, trying to make light of the whole thing. You'd think I'd announced I was running off to join the circus. It was just a joke. Gemma, who was only 29 and still optimistic about marriage, looked uncomfortable. But Morven, wasn't it a bit... with his brother right there? That's what made it funny, I insisted. God, everyone's so uptight. Ewan got it. He was laughing. Was he? Xian asked quietly. She was closer to my age and had been through her own marital troubles. Because from what you're describing, it sounds like he was mortified. You're both being dramatic, I said, pulling out my phone. Look, I'll text him right now and prove you're wrong. I typed quickly. Hope you survived Ruth's interrogation last night. Thanks for being the only one with a sense of humor. Some people need to learn to live a little, or by their ex. There, I said, showing them the message before hitting send. See? We're fine. But Xian was shaking her head. Morven, please tell me there's nothing actually going on with Ewan. The question hit too close to home, and I felt my cheeks burn. Of course not. God, what kind of person do you think I am? The truth was more complicated. There had been moments over the past few months, a hand lingering too long on my shoulder, conversations that went deeper than they should have, that afternoon in the hotel bar, when we'd both had too much wine and ended up in his room. But it wasn't serious, not really, just two people finding comfort in each other when life got lonely. I'm just saying, Xian continued carefully, maybe Darren picked up on something. Men aren't always as oblivious as we think. My phone buzzed. Ewan's response was shorter than usual. We need to talk. Darren's acting weird. I showed the message to Gemma and Xian, trying to keep my voice light. See? He's worried about Darren, not angry at me. But even as I said it, something cold settled in my stomach. If Darren was acting weird, what exactly did that mean? And why did Ewan sound so nervous? The rest of the day dragged. I tried to focus on the campaign I was working on, but my mind kept drifting to the dinner, to the look on Ruth's face, to Darren's abrupt departure from the table. When my mother texted me around lunchtime, I felt a brief surge of hope. Darling, perhaps you should smooth things over with Darren. You know how he can be when he gets in one of his moods. Just apologize for the joke and move on. XXX. But 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Ruth's name flashed on the screen and my heart sank. Hello, Ruth, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Morven. Her voice was crisp, professional. Her nurse voice, I realized. The one she probably used to deliver bad news to families. I wanted to talk to you about last night. Oh, that, I said with a laugh. I hope you know I was just being silly. You know how I am. I'm not calling about the joke, Ruth interrupted. I'm calling about Isla. That stopped me cold. What about Isla? She asked me this morning why Daddy looked so sad at dinner. She wanted to know if Mummy and Daddy were going to get divorced like her friend Emma's parents. The words hit me like a slap. That's ridiculous. She's 8 years old. She doesn't understand. She understands more than you think, Ruth said quietly. Children always do. They pick up on tension, on the things adults think they're hiding. And right now that little girl is scared. Well, maybe if Darren didn't storm off like a child every time someone tries to lighten the mood. Morven. Ruth's voice was sharp now. I've known my son for 35 years. I've never seen him look the way he looked last night. Whatever's going on, whatever you think you're hiding, it's affecting everyone in this family. including an 8-year-old girl who loves you both. The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I think, Ruth continued, her voice softer but no less firm, that you need to think very carefully about what kind of example you want to set for Isla, and what kind of mother you want to be. She hung up before I could respond. I sat staring at my phone, Ruth's words echoing in my head. What kind of mother did I want to be? What kind of person was I becoming? But then anger flared, hot and defensive. Who was Ruth to lecture me about motherhood? Who was anyone to judge me when they didn't know what it was like to be married to someone who treated you like a stranger in your own home? I was spiraling, and I knew it, but I couldn't seem to stop. I suggested meeting at the little cafe near the town centre, somewhere neutral, where we could talk without being overheard. Ewan was already there when I arrived, hunched over a coffee cup, looking like he hadn't slept. "You look terrible," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Thanks," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. Really needed to hear that. "I'm joking," I said, reaching across to touch his hand. "God, everyone's so serious lately. What's going on with Darren? Your text made it sound like he's having some kind of breakdown." Ewan pulled his hand away, glancing around nervously. "Morven, we need to talk about last night, about what you said." "What about it? It was a harmless joke." "It wasn't harmless." His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Do you have any idea how that sounded? In front of my parents? In front of Isla?" I felt my defenses rising. "I'm sorry if I embarrassed you, but honestly, I thought you had a sense of humor. I thought you understood that some of us need to find joy where we can, especially when we're married to someone who acts like showing emotion is a crime." "This isn't about Darren," Ewan said, though his voice lacked conviction. "This is about us, about what we've been doing." "What we've been doing," I repeated slowly, "is being friends, close friends, and if that's grown into something more, well, maybe there's a reason for that." But even as I said it, I could see the guilt written all over his face. Ewan had always been the more emotional of the two brothers, the one who wore his heart on his sleeve. It's what had drawn me to him in the first place. That openness, that warmth that Darren seemed incapable of showing. "Darren asked me yesterday if there was anything he should know," Ewan said quietly. "Just like that, out of nowhere. Is there anything I should know about you and Morven?" My blood went cold. "What did you tell him?" "I told him no, of course, but Morven..." He looked up at me finally, and I saw fear in his eyes. "He knows. I don't know how, but he knows something." "He doesn't know anything," I said firmly. "He's fishing. Darren's always been paranoid, always looking for drama where there isn't any. You're letting him get in your head." "Am I?" Ewan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I keep thinking about that hotel room, about what we did, and I keep wondering how I'm supposed to look my brother in the eye knowing..." "Knowing what?" I interrupted. "Knowing that you comforted someone who needed it. Knowing that you showed kindness to someone whose own husband treats her like she's invisible." It was a low blow, and I knew it, using Ewan's guilt about Darren to deflect from my own behavior. But I was scared now, scared of what it would mean if everything came out. "If you're feeling guilty," I continued, "then maybe you should think about why you pursued me in the first place. I didn't force you into that hotel room, Ewan." His face went white. "I pursued you. Morven, you were the one who..." "Who what?" I challenged. "Who responded to your attention? Who appreciated that someone in this family actually seemed to enjoy my company?" We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our mutual accusations hanging between us. Finally, Ewan shook his head. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he said. "This is why it was a mistake from the beginning." "So what are you saying? That you regret it?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I regret all of it. I regret hurting my brother. I regret confusing Isla. And I regret putting you in a position where you think lying and manipulation are your only options." The words stung more than I'd expected. I'm not lying or manipulating anyone. I'm trying to protect what's left of this family. By making jokes about our affair in front of everyone. It wasn't about the affair, I snapped, louder than I'd intended. A couple at the next table looked over, and I lowered my voice. It was just a stupid joke. If people want to read something into it, that's their problem. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The joke had been deliberate, a way of marking my territory, of showing that I had secrets and power that Darren didn't know about. It had been cruel, and we both knew it. Ewan was shaking his head again. I can't do this anymore, Morven. I can't keep lying to my family, and I can't keep pretending this was just some innocent friendship that got out of hand. Fine, I said, standing up abruptly. If you want to throw away what we had, if you want to side with Darren and his mother and everyone else who's decided I'm the villain here, that's your choice. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. I left him sitting there, but not before I saw the fear flash across his face again. Good, I thought. Let him be scared. Let him remember that I wasn't the only one with something to lose. But as I walked back to my car, my hands shaking with adrenaline and something that might have been panic, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made everything infinitely worse. That evening, desperate to regain some sense of control, I posted a photo on social media. The whole family at last Christmas, everyone smiling, Isla on Darren's shoulders, me with my arms around both brothers. I captioned it, "Warm family first," and waited for the likes and comments that would remind me that we looked happy, that we could be happy again. But within an hour, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Darren had unfollowed me. After 5 years of marriage, countless shared photos and inside jokes, he'd quietly removed me from his social media world. It was such a small thing, really. But somehow, it felt like the beginning of the end. I knew I had to address things head-on. Darren had been avoiding me for days, leaving early for work and coming home late, speaking to me only when Isla was around, and even then, in carefully neutral tones. The house felt like a minefield, and I was tired of walking on eggshells. "We need to talk," I announced when he finally came home that Thursday evening. Isla was at her friend's house for a sleepover, so we had the house to ourselves. "Do we?" he asked, not looking up from his laptop. "Yes, we do. This silent treatment is ridiculous, Darren. I made one joke at dinner, and you're acting like I committed murder." Finally, he looked at me, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't anger or hurt. It was something much worse. It was disappointment. And underneath that, a kind of weary resignation that made my chest tight. "Is that really what you think this is about?" he asked quietly. "One joke? What else would it be about?" He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. "Morven, do you remember when we first got married and you used to complain that I didn't talk to you enough? That I kept things to myself?" The change of subject threw me. "What does that have to do with anything?" "You were right," he said. "I'm not good at expressing my feelings. I'm not spontaneous or charming like Ewan. I don't always know the right thing to say or do, but I hoped, that you knew I loved you anyway." Something in his tone made me nervous. "Darren, what are you trying to say?" "I'm trying to say that I've been watching you pull away from me for months. I've seen the way you look at me, like I'm some kind of burden you have to tolerate. I've heard you on the phone with your friends, complaining about how boring I am, how I don't make you laugh. That's not—" And I told myself it was just a rough patch, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Marriages go through them. I thought if I gave you space, if I didn't push, things would get better." "They can get better," I said quickly. "If you'd just talk to me, if you'd show some emotion once in a while instead of shutting me out." "Is that why you've been fucking my brother?" The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He knew. Somehow he knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed. Darren laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Even now, even when we both know the truth, you're still lying to me." "I'm not lying about anything. If you think—" The hotel receipts, Morven. The credit card statements. The text messages. His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but I could hear something breaking underneath. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? My mind raced, trying to remember what evidence there might be, what digital trail we'd left behind, but it was too late for damage control now. It wasn't serious, I said finally. It was just, we were both lonely, and it happened a few times, but it didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. He repeated the words like he was testing how they sounded. My wife and my brother. And it didn't mean anything. Darren, please, let me explain. And then, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken, you made that joke. In front of my parents, in front of our daughter. You sat at my table and made a joke about fucking my brother, and you expected me to just... What? Laugh along. I'd never heard him use language like that, and it scared me more than shouting would have. This cold, precise anger was foreign territory. It wasn't about that, I protested. The joke wasn't about... I would never... What was it about then, Morven? Explain it to me, because I'm clearly too stupid to understand. The sarcasm in his voice was like a slap. I felt tears starting, and I let them come. Sometimes tears worked with Darren, softened his resolve. I was just trying to fit in, I said, letting my voice break. I always feel like an outsider with your family, like I'm being judged. I thought if I could make them laugh, if I could show them I belonged, by humiliating me in front of everyone I love. I wasn't trying to humiliate you, I was trying to save our marriage. By sleeping with my brother. By finding some happiness somewhere. The words burst out of me, raw and desperate. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to you? You come home, you eat dinner, you work on your laptop, you go to bed. You barely touch me, barely talk to me, barely acknowledge I exist unless Isla's around. So it's my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault, I'm saying... You're saying I drove you to it, that if I'd been a better husband, you wouldn't have needed to find comfort in my brother's bed. Put like that, it sounded terrible. But wasn't there some truth to it? I'm saying marriages take work from both people, I said. And when one person checks out emotionally... I checked out. For the first time, his voice rose slightly. Morven, I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for this house, for Ila's school, for the holidays you wanted. I took care of you when you were sick. I supported your career changes. I listened to you complain about your mother and your friends and your job. What exactly did I not give you? You didn't give me you, I shouted. The real you. You gave me your paycheck and your schedule and your polite attention, but you never let me in. You never shared what you were really thinking or feeling. And that justified betraying me with the person I trust most in the world. The question hung between us, and I realized I didn't have an answer that would make this better. Nothing I said would undo what I'd done, would repair the trust I'd broken. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry, Darren. It was a mistake, all of it. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... No, he said simply. We can't. What do you mean? I mean, I'm done, Morven. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with the gaslighting. And I'm done pretending this marriage is something it isn't. Fear shot through me, sharp and cold. You don't mean that. Think about Isla. Think about our family. I am thinking about Isla. I'm thinking about what kind of home we're providing for her, what kind of example we're setting. And I've decided she deserves better than parents who tear each other apart. So you're just giving up? Just like that? I'm not giving up, he said. I'm accepting reality. This marriage is over, Morven. It's been over for a while, but I was too stubborn to admit it. I stared at him, looking for some crack in his resolve, some sign that he could be talked out of this. But his face was calm, determined. He'd already made his decision. Where are you going? I asked as he stood up. To pack a bag. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. Darren, please. We'll need to tell Isla together, he said, pausing at the doorway. But first, I think we both need some time to figure out how we're going to handle this. He left me sitting there, and I heard his footsteps on the stairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing. 20 minutes later, he was gone. I sat in our living room, surrounded by the detritus of our life together. Isla's toys, our wedding photos, the throw pillows I'd insisted on buying, and tried to process what had just happened. But even then, even as my marriage crumbled around me, I couldn't quite accept that this was my fault. Darren was overreacting, I told myself. He was hurt and angry, but he'd calm down. He'd remember that we had a child together, a life together. He'd come back. It wasn't until I woke up the next morning and found the legal documents on the kitchen table that I realized how wrong I was. The folder was neat, professional, with my name written on it in Darren's careful handwriting. Inside were papers I didn't understand at first, legal letterhead, formal language, terms like irreconcilable differences and custody arrangements. A divorce petition. He'd actually filed for divorce. My first instinct was to call him, to demand an explanation, but his phone went straight to voicemail, so I did the next logical thing. I called Ewan. "Please tell me you know what's going on," I said when he answered. "Please tell me Darren's just trying to scare me." "Morven." His voice was tired, defeated. "He knows everything. About the hotel, about the other times. He has evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Does it matter? It's over. We both knew this could happen." "It's not over," I snapped. "Nothing's over until I say it is. We can deny everything. We can say he's being paranoid." "I'm not denying anything," Ewan said quietly. "I'm not lying anymore." "So you're just going to throw me under the bus, after everything we meant to each other?" "What did we mean to each other, Morven? Really? Because I've been thinking about it, and I honestly don't know anymore." The question caught me off guard. What had we meant to each other? It had started as flirtation, escalated to emotional intimacy, and eventually became physical. But love, I wasn't sure either of us had ever used that word. "We were there for each other," I said finally. "When things got difficult, when we needed someone who understood." "I was there for you," he corrected. "I listened to you complain about my brother. I made you feel better about yourself. I gave you attention when you felt neglected. But what did you give me, Morven? Besides guilt and the destruction of my relationship with my family?" His words stung because there was truth in them. I had used Ewan, I realized. Used his kindness, his loneliness, his need to be needed, just like I'd used Darren's stability and devotion for years without really appreciating either. "That's not fair," I protested. "You wanted this as much as I did." Maybe I did in the moment, but I never wanted to hurt Darren, and I never wanted to destroy our family. And that's exactly what we've done. We haven't destroyed anything that wasn't already broken. "Keep telling yourself that," he said sadly. "But I'm done, Morven. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with the sneaking around, and I'm done pretending this was anything other than a massive mistake." He hung up, leaving me alone with the legal papers and a growing sense of panic. I tried calling my mother, hoping for support, but even she seemed subdued. "Oh, darling," she said when I explained the situation. "I was afraid something like this might happen. The way you talked about Darren lately, the jokes you made, I should have said something." "You should have said something," I repeated incredulously. "Mum, I need you on my side here. I need someone to help me figure out how to fix this." "I don't think it can be fixed, love. Not after what you've done. Even my own mother was abandoning me. The injustice of it made me furious." "Fine," I said. "If everyone wants to paint me as the villain, then maybe I'll give them what they want. Maybe I'll tell everyone exactly what kind of husband Darren really was, how he drove me to this." "Morven, don't do anything you'll regret." But I'd already hung up. I spent the rest of the morning crafting a social media post, a carefully worded explanation of how I'd been emotionally neglected, how I'd made mistakes, but that everyone deserved compassion and understanding. I wanted people to see my side, to understand that this wasn't as simple as everyone was making it out to be. But before I could post it, my phone rang. an unknown number with a local area code. Mrs. Blythe, this is Sarah Chen from Morrison & Associates. I'm representing your husband in his divorce petition. I was wondering if you had legal representation yet, as we'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss custody and financial arrangements. The business-like tone, the assumption that this was all a foregone conclusion, made my head spin. I don't need a lawyer, I said. This is all a misunderstanding. My husband is just upset, but we'll work it out. Mrs. Blythe, I'm afraid your husband is quite serious about proceeding with the divorce. We have substantial evidence of adultery, and given the circumstances, he's seeking primary custody of your daughter. Primary custody? The words hit me like ice water. He can't do that. Isla needs her mother. Of course, and we're not seeking to prevent visitation, but given the nature of the evidence we have and the impact this situation has had on the child's emotional well-being, we believe it's in her best interest to have a stable primary residence. I wanted to argue, to fight, to demand to know what right they had to judge my parenting. But underneath the anger was a cold, creeping fear. What if they could prove I was an unfit mother? What if they took Isla away? I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course, but Mrs. Blythe, I should mention that we'll need to move quickly on temporary arrangements. Your husband is very concerned about the current living situation. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone, trying to process what was happening. In the space of 24 hours, my marriage had ended, my lover had abandoned me, and now they were threatening to take my daughter. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was supposed to be the victim here, the neglected wife who'd made an understandable mistake. Instead, I was being treated like some kind of monster. But even as I raged against the unfairness of it all, a small voice in the back of my head whispered that maybe, just maybe, I'd brought this on myself. I pushed that voice away and started Googling divorce lawyers. The family court building was intimidating, all glass and steel, with security guards and metal detectors and an atmosphere of serious consequences. I'd hired a lawyer, though not the expensive one I'd wanted. My mother had helped with the retainer, but money was already becoming an issue. My solicitor, David Hartwell, was competent, but not particularly optimistic about our chances. The evidence is quite extensive, he'd warned me during our preparation meeting. Text messages, hotel receipts, credit card statements, even some photographs from social media that show you and the brother-in-law in what could be interpreted as compromising situations. They're just photos of us talking, I'd protested. At a hotel bar, at 2 a.m., according to the timestamps, and then there are the witness statements. What witness statements? Your colleagues at work, apparently. They're saying you made jokes about the affair, that you seemed to be bragging about it. I thought about Gemma and Cian, about the conversations in the break room that I'd thought were private. Had they really gone to Darren's lawyer? Had they really betrayed me like that? They're taking things out of context, I said. I was just venting, just trying to deal with a difficult situation. Perhaps, but in the context of a custody hearing, it doesn't look good. It suggests a lack of judgment, a cavalier attitude toward the marriage and family. Now, sitting in the courtroom waiting for the judge to make her decision, I felt small and exposed. Darren sat across the aisle with his lawyer, calm and composed as always. He'd testified earlier with quiet dignity, answering questions about my behavior, about the impact on Isla, about his concerns for her emotional well-being. I'd tried to present my side, the years of emotional neglect, the loneliness, the way I'd been driven to seek comfort elsewhere. But even as I spoke, I could see the judge's expression growing colder. Mrs. Blythe, she'd said during my testimony, are you suggesting that your husband's alleged emotional distance justified adultery with his brother? I'm suggesting that marriages are complicated, I'd replied, that when people don't get what they need at home, they sometimes make mistakes. And the joke you made at the family dinner, how do you explain that? I'd tried to minimize it, to explain that it was just poor judgment, that I'd been drinking and trying to lighten the mood. But I could see it wasn't working. The worst part had been Isla's testimony. They'd interviewed her privately, but the judge had shared some of her responses. She'd talked about the tension at home, about hearing her parents argue, about being scared that it was somehow her fault. She's a bright child, the judge had noted, and she's clearly been affected by the instability in the home. Now, as we waited for the final ruling, I found myself thinking about all the choices that had led me here. The first time I'd flirted with Ewan, the first time we'd crossed the line, the joke at dinner that had brought everything crashing down. At what point could I have stopped? At what point had it become inevitable? In the matter of Blythe versus Blythe, the judge began, and my stomach clenched. The ruling was swift and decisive. Darren was granted primary custody, with me receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. The financial arrangements were similarly stark. I'd keep the house but would have to buy out Darren's share, something I couldn't afford on my salary alone. The court finds, the judge explained, that while both parties bear some responsibility for the breakdown of the marriage, the evidence suggests a pattern of deceptive and manipulative behavior that has negatively impacted the minor child. In the best interests of the child, she requires stability and an environment free from conflict. I wanted to argue, to protest that this wasn't fair, that I was being punished for one mistake, but my lawyer's hand on my arm kept me silent. As we filed out of the courtroom, I saw Darren and Isla together in the hallway. She was holding his hand, looking up at him with trust and love, and for a moment I saw them as the judge must have, a father protecting his daughter from an unstable situation, from an unstable mother. "Mummy?" Isla saw me and started to come over, but Darren gently held her back. "Remember what we talked about," he said quietly. "We'll see Mummy on Saturday, okay?" She nodded, but I could see the confusion in her eyes, the hurt. She didn't understand why her family had fallen apart, why she couldn't live with both her parents anymore. And the terrible truth was, I wasn't sure I could explain it to her in a way that didn't make me the villain of the story. As I watched them walk away together, Darren's hand protective on Isla's shoulder, I finally understood what I'd lost. Not just a marriage, not just a lover, but the respect of my daughter, the trust of my family, the life I'd built over years of careful construction. All for what? A few months of feeling desired, of feeling important, of feeling like I mattered to someone. The legal documents the court clerk handed me felt heavy in my hands. Custody schedules, visitation rights, financial obligations. The bureaucratic language of a life dismantled. My mother was waiting for me outside the courthouse, her face drawn with worry and disappointment. "How did it go?" she asked, though my expression probably told her everything. "He got everything," I said numbly. "The house, Isla, everything." She put her arm around me, and for a moment I let myself lean into her comfort. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked back at the courthouse, then at the legal papers in my hand, then at the street where Darren and Isla had disappeared from view. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I honestly don't know." For the first time since this whole mess began, I was telling the complete truth. I had no idea how to rebuild from here, how to earn back my daughter's trust, how to live with the consequences of my choices. All I knew was that the joke I'd made at that family dinner, the joke that had seemed so harmless, so clever at the time, had cost me everything that mattered. And there was no one to blame but myself. 6 months later, I still see Isla every other Saturday. She's polite but distant, and I can see Darren's influence in the way she carefully measures her words around me. Ewan moved to Edinburgh shortly after the divorce was finalised. We haven't spoken since that day in the cafe. Sometimes I tell myself that I was the victim of circumstance, of a loveless marriage, of a family that never really accepted me. But in the quiet moments, when I'm alone in the house that's too big for one person, I remember the look on Isla's face when I made that joke, the confusion, the fear, the dawning realization that something was very wrong with her family. I think I didn't do anything wrong, just made a joke to get a laugh. But the truth is more complicated than that, and the price of my harmless joke was everything I claimed to love. Some jokes, it turns out, aren't funny at all. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.